First of all, here's a pro filmmaker tip. Don't name two characters, Sherry and Cheryl, and expect me to always know what the fuck we're talking about, okay?
It
Um,
was Shelley.
no, but he dragged Linda out of the.
Well, yeah, but that's not either of those.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched. I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
And this is David. And today we finally watched The Evil Dead.
Oh no, buddy, you finally watched The Evil Dead.
I thought you hadn't seen this.
No, I've seen this. I've seen Evil Dead 2. I've seen Army of Darkness. And I saw the 2013 remake.
Oh, well then I finally watched me, David, The Evil Dead.
And also, we'd like to say thank you again to Jesse Jace Thomas for that awesome intro. Every time I hear it, it gets better.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I like it a lot. And if you want to hear more from him, you can go to jessejacethomas.bandcamp.com.
So, I was first introduced to this series of films, this Evil Dead cinematic universe, if you will.
The EDCU, obviously.
You say the EVC? Oh, the EDCU. Yes. Yeah, and so in college, I was in college, and the crowd that I was rolling with were very big into horror movies, and this was like a favorite of theirs. And yeah, I wondered then, and I still kind of wonder now if this is like where the premise of those cabin in the woods horror movies kind of stem from. You know, this was like kind of mid to late 80s. I want to believe that there were probably more cabin in the wood horror movie esque films earlier than this one, but I feel like whenever you see or hear one being kind of remade or like turned on its head, it all references and comes from Evil Dead. And
Well, this one was made in 81. So this was like, I think you might... Evil Dead 2 was 87.
oh no, you're right. I was thinking of Evil Dead 2. Yeah. But you know, I mean, people love this movie. It's definitely like one of the bigger cult classic followings that people have, and it's been turned into all sorts of things. I remember one year back in like 2015, I went to go see Evil Dead the musical, and that was amazing. It was actually one of the best theater performances that I've ever been to. It was like if you sat in the first 5 rows, you were in like the soak zone, and they just spewed blood all over the audience and everything like that. It was awesome.
It's like that dude. Who's that dude that crushes watermelons on people? The guy
Someone
who's got like
crushes-
the... You don't know who I'm talking about?
No. Whenever I think
Gallagher.
it-
Gallagher is who I'm thinking of.
on stage.
Yeah, he just hit fucking watermelons with a mallet, and if you're in like the first 5 rows, you could get watermelon all over you. That's what it reminds me of.
Whenever I hear like a theatrical performance in like a splash zone, I always think of Blue Man Group.
Yeah. I saw Blue Man Group, in Orlando, and we were way back though, but they freaking like run all over. By the way I had to get to Gallagher is I remember Chappelle did a sketch where he played a black version, and I was like, what did he call himself? Black Gallagher. I was like, okay, Gallagher. That's what it is.
And that's the turnaround. There we go. Yeah, no, I mean, the Evil Dead the musical, if it's ever in like your town or anything, you got to go see it because it is fun. Anyway, so yeah, and I think what most people like when they think of Evil Dead, most people refer to the second one. I think because it was like a reboot of the first, and it was done in my opinion kind of a better way, because I think the way Sam Raimi wanted to do it is he put way more comedic jest in the film, and it was like an because Army of Darkness is like 100% comedy, pretty much. So to have a sequel that's like the Army of Darkness, you cannot have the first movie be like the Evil Dead 1981, the one we watched. So the Evil Dead 2 is a better transition to into Army of Darkness.
Does Army of Darkness he goes back in time? Is that what the plot of that is?
So a fun story about that is that when Sam Raimi made the first one, it was like a pretty like successful, right? Um, and cult following, but still pretty successful. And then he went to go make another movie, and it was like completely flopped. So his agent was like, "You know what? You're not really good at anything else. You should go back to like what you know, like back at the Evil Dead stuff." And so who caught wind of him going back to the Evil Dead stuff was Stephen King. And Stephen King was making Maximum Overdrive at the time, which was Stephen King's first directorial debut for his own
Right.
stuff. And so he talked his producer for Maximum Overdrive to fund Evil Dead 2 for Sam Raimi. And so there was like a lot of stipulations and stuff like that. And he was like, look, you don't have to do it this movie, but one of your movies has to involve medieval times and it has to involve time travel. So that's why Army of Darkness is the way it is because of that producer.
Yeah, so apparently Sam Raimi's second movie is called Crime Wave.
Crime
And
Wave.
It's apparently not good.
No.
Well, and you said this movie's successful, so I think one thing that you have to qualify this movie about when you watch it now is it only cost $350,000 to make. And it was made in like 20 days, or principal photography was shot in like 20 days in like this one cabin, and then some other like a couple locations to make the cabin bigger. That was one thing I noticed during the movie. Was like this cabin just is bigger and bigger. Like they move this way and they move that way. It's got a fucking basement. I was like, it makes no sense structurally. But when you qualify it with that this is like the first movie that Sam Raimi ever made that wasn't a short. It's the first movie that Bruce Campbell acted in that wasn't a short. It's just so impressive. And it's like, it wasn't scary, obviously, because it's 40 years old, but it was disgusting, which is like the hallmark of a good scary movie from that time.
Right.
It's, you know, some of it here and there didn't hold up, but obviously, once again, it's 40 years later. I mean, the same thing sort of with the thing we talked about, which these came out at the exact same time.
More so on that though, it's like the practical effects. Well, okay, first of all, do you know how much money this ended up making?
It said like 2.5 million, but by this point now, it has to be a lot more, right?
Well, if you count this as the baseline for the EDCU, then yes, like a lot more. But I know Evil Dead 2 made somewhere in the $6 million range. So it was like way, and it was like the same budget, right? The same shoestring budget. But it kind of just put Bruce Campbell and of course Sam Raimi on the map. Like I think my first introduction to Sam Raimi, I think a lot of people's first introductions to Sam Raimi is Spider-Man. And so when I learned that this movie was by the same guy who made Spider-Man, I was like, no. But if you really go back and look at his movies like back in the early 2000s and even like Multiverse of Madness, you see a lot of tropes that stem from his beginnings in Evil Dead.
You know what's funny is, so we said that this budget was like 350,000. Spider-Man 3's budget was reportedly $350 million.
Spider-Man 3?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is just nuts to consider, because like I don't know if we'll ever see again a $350 million budget movie.
I feel like one of the MCU movies where it was around, I think Avengers 2 was around that much.
I'm saying like going forward right now, it's like streaming and all that. Yeah, obviously I don't think 350 is the cap anymore. But what I'm saying is like going
Oh,
forward now with like the way Disney cuts budgets on CGI and shit, and they're mostly CGI movies, and then like all the new actors that are in it now who are obviously going to have a lower pay that they're going to get as opposed to like RDJ who's making what 50 million a movie because of his like producer credits and all that shit. Like we're
right,
never going to see something that high again unless like movie theaters really fucking come back.
right. Well, one thing I definitely want to talk about of the Evil Dead 1981 is the practical effects and probably why a part of their budget was so on the lower end. But then there was some pretty cool stop motion stuff too. So let's get in it. So we start the movie out like every other movie with five teenagers driving to their friend slash uncle slash estranged neighbor's cabin in the middle of the woods. I just want to talk about the dialogue in the first scene where they're all driving around in the car. It's so like Sam Raimi's cutting away to people's different like reaction shots are so corny, but I love it. Like I was like, okay, like now if you saw that nowadays, it wouldn't hold up. But like watching it back and knowing who he is, it's like the moments that other characters make is so great.
What I noticed is how much it looked like Bruce Campbell wanted to kill all the people singing. And he's just like, shut the fuck up.
What about that cutting back and forth, where they're singing and then the POV from the wood?
I thought that was really cool. That was kind of my favorite part was all of the camera work, right? And it's like a common thing in a lot of like now known directors, but their first movies, like how showy they were.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah.
and did you read on how they did the camera shots in the woods?
Enlighten us.
Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell on one side and the other of a 2x4 with the camera hoisted on the middle of it, like tightened onto it, and them just running through the woods carrying it is what I was told.
I believe it.
Or what I read. I wasn't told. I didn't call anybody.
You call Mr. Raimi himself?
Right.
That's cool. That's cool. I mean, a 2x4 running through the woods with a camera, you're just like wondering how many times they just got sidelined by like a branch or like a stick sticking out in the middle of the ground.
Well, the other thing I read is that like a lot of people got injured on this. Like
Mm.
just a lot. Like Bruce Campbell mostly. Like I think he lost teeth. He got apparently the last scene where it like goes through the different cabins and goes through the cabin and comes and hits him at the end, like
Hmm.
the final ghost or whatever. Like really
It's a
fucked him
demon.
up. Yeah, it's a demon, whatever. It's the devil.
It's a
But
deadite.
it was just like a motorcycle and it like crashed
It's
into
a
him.
motorcycle.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Well,
Which is funny too because I guess that we'll get back to it, but that ending is supposed to be the demon getting him
right.
finally. And I was like, well, that's not going to happen. Obviously, there's sequels, a TV show, and all that. So it's like,
Well, what's funny about the Evil Dead 1981 is that it's kind of a standalone movie because Evil Dead 2, even though it's called Evil Dead 2, is basically like a soft reboot remake
both.
both of Evil Dead. So yeah, this is kind of just a standalone film.
Well, and I don't want to get too much into like the things I read, but this ties directly to it. The fact that they sold the rights to this because they didn't, Sam Raimi didn't think he'd have anything else to do with it. But then it turns out he didn't actually sell like the rights to the story and characters. And so that gave him the ability to make Evil Dead 2 like later down the road, just like not getting the contract right for whoever bought it. And
Nice.
also, 2.6 million, like 2.6 million on 350,000 is a good return, but it's maybe not something someone's going to fight over in court. They're like, that crappy thing you did, you can keep it.
Also, can you imagine like losing teeth on set into this like shoestring budget independent movie, like being pretty pissed about it? I'd be pretty pissed about it. But then that like in turn like made Bruce Campbell as successful as he is like today, or he doesn't do much today, but as he was, it's like, okay, yeah, I lose a couple of teeth to be that successful now,
Yeah. And so back to it, we get the camera work all the way up until I love the shot of the car driving up to the cabin and the camera following behind.
Yeah.
I thought was really cool. And then we're like right into it. You know what I mean? Normally there's like a lull and you got like 20 minutes until something happens. And this is like the next scene she's drawing and you get the join us, and the cellar door opens, right? Like it's like immediate.
Yeah, in the beginning we get into it like the little things happening, but like we really get into the thick of it about 30 minutes into the movie is when like the possessions start. Uh the uh the comedic beat where Scott walks all the way up to the door and then it cuts to the wide where the other four of them are like still by the cars cuz they're already like getting bad vibes from this cabin. I thought that was pretty funny.
I didn't think anything was funny about this movie. I don't think it was trying to be funny, but there was like the hokey, like them playing around with each other, throwing the stuff out of the car to Bruce Campbell and him like throwing it back. Like
Oh,
there
yeah.
was that. That was like, I don't know. You thought this was going to be like a teen sex horror movie a little bit, and you do get some nudity, but really it's just straight horror.
But
Just
not
like,
where you think.
yeah, no, definitely didn't see that coming in the woods.
You didn't see tree rape coming into this playing into this movie?
No, yeah, did not. That was a choice that he made. Back to it though. We're in the house. The cellar opens up. Scott decides he's the one that's going to go down. Um, and Ash is like very quickly like, all right, it's been 15 seconds. I have to go down too. And then I'm like, yeah, he isn't yelling back. But then you get down there and it's huge down there. Like it's
Yeah.
way bigger than the rest of
Huge.
the cabin.
It's so big actually that you can't really tell what the layout is. Actually, you can't tell what the layout is for anything during this entire movie. Um, right when you start to think, oh, maybe I get it now, they go through like a whole nother door and there's a whole nother room, and you're like, I'm like, whatever. I don't understand. But yeah, he goes into like the cellar, and then there's like a little offshoot room, and he finds all this creepy shit, right? He finds like a sword with like a skeleton hilt, and then he finds the book, right? The book.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't notice the book actually until later, like much later. I must have just missed it there. I noticed a book, but I didn't notice it was the book, like the one
the
made
book
of
that she
skin.
drew.
I thought she was drawing a clock. Oh, I thought that was the cellar. Ah, maybe it was the book. Whatever. It's a fucking rectangle.
It was the book with the face on it. Yeah.
Um, and then there is some stuff in the beginning where you're just like, Scott's kind of a fucking idiot. So first he like points the gun right at Ash's face,
Right.
which that's a real shotgun. Then there's this. I don't even remember how it comes up, but Scott says this line. He's like, "Yeah, everyone hates him." And then the one of the girls, not Cheryl or Linda, Shelley, is like, "Yeah, just like you." And he goes, "Haha, I'm gonna break your face." And I was like,
Yeah.
"What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Yeah. I was thinking, wow, 80s domestic abuse really took like a jovial turn, right? Just casually threatened to break someone's fucking face, and it's just like, oh, Scott.
Well, I read that Sam Raimi had to sort of like in the years after is like apologize for the tree rape thing, and then Bruce Campbell has apologized for hitting Linda, and I was like, listen, man, she was a demon at that point, and
I
then
don't get the apology for any of those, because if you set it up in your movie, like the lore is that's how it happens in your, you know, universe of the movie that you're writing, then you have nothing to apologize for. That was like an artistic choice, and you just have to like commit to that.
yeah, I don't. I mean, I guess I don't. I guess you could say it falls a line with a lot of tropes of like sexual violence against women in horror movies. But I don't know. In this one, I was just like, it's kind of fucking weird. But I don't know. I didn't find it overly like. I didn't have a problem with it. overall. You know what I mean? Like, but some of the Cheryl, who it happens to in the movies, just point out later on that like it just today wouldn't be done that way, and I probably agree. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
they.
even like 10, 15 years ago, it could have still been done that way, but yeah, maybe not today.
I need to rewatch the 2013 remake and see if there was any tree sex in that one.
You still got to watch
Um,
Titan to see the car sex scene.
does the car like come alive and actively like have sex with?
You got to watch it. You got to
Okay,
watch the movie.
okay.
Um, it's at this point when Cheryl's sort of freaking out as the incantation is being read. I'm like, why is Cheryl brought along here? Because it's like Ash's with Linda, Scotty's with Shelly. And I was like, oh, okay. It's because Cheryl needs to be like the first victim. Like you need someone who's by themselves.
Right.
Although I did realize later on, Scotty has this off the cuff remark saying that Cheryl is Ash's sister, which totally makes sense of why Ash was willing to drive her to town. Because if it's not someone you're trying to bang and it's not someone you're related to, you'd probably just tell them to shut the fuck
Then
up.
why put in the effort? Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, what's he doing? You know what I mean? So
Okay, I mean that if it's his sister, that makes a lot more sense. And there's a brothers and sister dynamic in the remake too, so that kind of ties that. I never noticed that he was Cheryl in Evil Dead 2. I'm pretty sure it's just Ash and his girlfriend. I'm pretty sure all the other side characters either come in later or just don't exist. Um,
I'm pretty confident we're gonna do Evil Dead 2 next year. So quit talking about it.
Well, I guess the reason I'm saying that is because for this one you have like the dynamic of like a bunch of teenagers, early 20-year-olds. I don't know how old they're supposed to be, but a bunch of people, together, and then it's very different from a dynamic of just like a couple, like a girlfriend and boyfriend dynamic. So being his sister, one, it makes a lot more sense, and two, it's another add-on, but it's funny, isn't it? It's like you have the emotional trauma of them trying to like um, get their own girlfriends off of them without hurting them to a certain point, but you never feel that weight when Ash has to battle Cheryl at the end. So yeah, I feel like that is something that they were lacking.
Right, right. Yeah, and the part about the sister is like it's only said the one time. If that line's not in there, I don't think there's any indication otherwise.
No, not at all.
So it's just that part is one. It's a byproduct of a movie that's it's like a lower budget movie, and you don't have the sometimes you're just like we need this fucking line in here so people understand it, but we don't have the time to establish it more. So we already talked a little bit, but about Cheryl going into the woods for some reason, just being drawn into the woods, even though she's by herself and freaked out. And she goes really far in there
Yeah.
for some reason. There's the tree rape scene. It's funny reading about the different because this is so low budget, you have no one fighting for it, but just like the censorship in different places. This movie was banned in Germany until 2016.
Because of the tree scene?
I think that's mostly it, yeah. And in
Because
some
as far as nudity, you just see like one boob and that's it.
well, there's two originally, right? You see Cheryl's, and then you see like a side boob of Shelley's.
Okay.
That was my boob counter, but whatever. But
Okay.
yeah, there's that, and then yeah, it has to be the tree scene, and just the rest of it's kind of disgusting. I think looking at it though, I don't know when you exactly watched Evil Dead, but from 2022 perspective, you're like, this is tame as hell. You know what I mean? So it's like social norms change, right? But like, so back then, this is just like, this is disgusting. We can't let society watch. I mean, you watched The Boat That Rocked, right? They're prudes, and England had the same. England banned this movie for a little bit. There's this woman who was a part of this society, and they had these movies. Her name was Mary Whitehouse, and she had this idea. It's called the Video Nasty, and it was a Video Nasty list of like movies that I guess she attempted to get banned in England, and so this was banned there for a little bit. But like in the different versions of this, the sex scene with the trees, I think they don't show nudity. Like they show nudity in the original, and then they cover it up to try and I think get a better rating in some versions of it and whatever. But just like all the machinations of trying to get this movie to be able to be played, and then just nowadays you look at it and you're like, that's so tame
Yeah.
compared to what we show people now.
Well, yes and no, right? And I don't want to get into any more of like censorship talk, but I think early 2000, 2006, 2007 was probably prime for us to be as like sexual, bloody, gory, whatever we want it to be in a movie. But now, because of the way society has developed, is we as a society, if we say society anymore, I'm going to feel like the fucking Joker. But
We live in a society.
shut up. But if you know, as a society, we become much more sensitive to people's. I'm also going to hate using this word too, but triggers, right? And so I feel like a lot of mainstream movies have steered away from being as gory and sexually and whatever as possible because they're thinking, okay, we want to be as acceptable to a general audience as possible. So we're going to take like the safe route, you know?
Yeah, it's different things though. Like it's maybe not necessarily the nudity, but it's like how was the nudity procured in the movie? It's maybe not the violence, but who's the violence against? Things like that, right? It's more
Right.
what groups are being portrayed in what ways is what has changed, I think. But then I brought up Titan earlier. It's Titan, but it's like Titan with an E at the end for us American people, if you want to know how to spell it. And that's like a foreign movie, and they just don't give a fuck over there.
Well, the French don't give a fuck.
Yeah,
Honestly.
so that movie is a thing. So Cheryl makes it back to the cabin after the tree scene, and for some reason the door is locked and the keys are on the outside, up top over the door again, like which is where Scott got them originally.
Right.
How did she even get out of the cabin? And then why was it locked? Like none of that makes sense to me. Did she go out the back door or a side door? Like what happened there?
It's the demons, man. You just blame everything on the demons in the end. The demons are even the ones that like took a couple of the keys and then stuck them into the frame of the door just so it's harder to pull out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess they just really wanted to build the sense of dread and the tension, and then Bruce Campbell just opens the door and drags her in. I'm curious what would have happened. Would it just been limbs that actually got her at the door and dragged her back out?
Like tree limbs?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. Like you and it's weird too, right? Like the demon had it into her that way, but then for the other people, the demon multiple demons, the demons entered them in different ways. Like Scott didn't need to have like a tree limb go up his butthole, right? To be a demon. So like it's like why did she have to do it and he didn't have to do it? Why did she have to do it and fucking
Well, the rest of them
Cheryl
is basically
didn't have to do it.
the rest of them is basically as if they were zombies or vampires, like blood transfusions or getting stabbed or whatever. That like, but then also from the POV camera of it traveling through the woods, it's almost like it's in the air, right? Kind of like
Right.
they come at night or whatever. So
Well, here's what I read from it is basically Cheryl got infected and she had to get infected outside of the cabin. And then when she was brought into it, she basically took like it is now inside the cabin, so it could spread within the cabin. That's what you're supposed to get from it.
and Ash is just immune.
Well, he's a big, strong man, so yeah, of course.
Well, he didn't start out that way. He didn't start out very strong. So we're back in the cabin. He tries to take Cheryl to the city, but the bridge has collapsed. Basically, there's no way out. They got to wait till morning. Always we got to wait till morning.
Well, yeah, but I also like the trope how they were like the car wouldn't start. And then she's like, it's not going to let us out of here. And then the car starts, and then it's another thing, and then it's another thing, et cetera,
I
et
love
cetera.
like she says that. She's like, "Oh, it's not gonna let us out here," and the fucking demon's like, "Oh shit, she's onto us. All right, start the car. Start the fucking car. Let her out."
Although, where was Ash when he left to go check on the bridge? He just fucking disappears. Cheryl goes out there to check on the bridge. She gets freaked out, right? She runs back to the car, and he just comes out from left field and like grabs her. As many times as Ash is used as a jump scare in this movie, and he never becomes possessed.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's just he's just used as like the just the fake outs. I love the segue from them doing the cards, and I love what is it? Linda guessing, and Shelly's just fucking lying to her that she's getting them right, or it's the vice versa.
It's the vice versa, and then yeah,
And then Cheryl just fucking has turned. That's like a very cool reveal. And then she fucking stabs Linda's ankle, and they're able to get her in the basement. Like that whole part is really cool.
and it also feels really natural, which is one of the things that I really like about this movie is that everyone like the cellar door being open, like that was established beforehand and everything like that. Um, yeah, I think that was all done very well. Like, I don't know why there were already chains on that cellar door, but hey, you know what? Whatever works.
Well, I mean, the original guy here probably had his wife locked down there. We get from the tapes, right?
So there's the tapes. We didn't really talk about the tapes, but they're, it's like, what are they, like archaeologists or something?
It reminded me of like the guy from The Exorcism, like the beginning, right? But yeah, he's basically just a dude who found the Book of the Dead. He's studying it, and then he's like awoken this up, which is funny. Like, did by them saying having the what the incantation said, is that what awoke the evil dead outside, right?
Yes, yes.
Which, by the way, the original title of this was The Book of the Dead, and the guy who helped like produce this was like, people don't read, baby. Like, we got to change the title.
Yeah, the book, the Necronomicon, actually is like a huge like thing that a bunch of lore is based around now.
Right.
That's the only thing that's consistent through every version and every iteration of Evil Dead is that fucking book. Made
Yeah.
out of human skin and written in blood.
But this isn't the genesis of that, right? Like that's a thing. That's a thing from before.
Yeah, probably not originally, but in like maybe recent pop culture.
Well, yeah, no, it's definitely a lot of people probably know it from this more than anything else. Oh, I just looked it up. It's like from H.P. Lovecraft. So, back to it. The POV of Shelley's attack is really cool. The way the camera comes through the window,
Through the window, yeah, yeah.
but it's like fucking Bruce Campbell's just sitting there, right? Like all this stuff happens with Scotty goes in there, gets attacked by Shelley. It's a pretty gruesome death for her, and then fucking Scotty has to chop her body up, and Ash is just sitting there like a fucking bitch. And I was like, how does he become the dude in
Army of
Army of
Darkness.
Darkness, right? Because I
Right.
know I've seen that's when he calls it his boomstick, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's when he cuts off his hand, puts
Whoa,
the
whoa,
chains.
whoa,
Oh,
whoa, whoa,
sorry.
whoa.
Yeah, the boomstick. That's all that happens.
That's all I asked for. Just didn't have to ruin more of it for me. But yeah, it's just surprising from the start, which you've already kind of pointed out several times, that the Evil Dead 2 is sort of like a reboot / just like that's what I should actually look for, going forward.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, so yeah, that death is pretty gruesome too. Like I didn't understand that. So she gets her hand almost like cut off from Scott's hunting knife, but then she starts like gnawing and chewing at it. Uh, was she eating her own arm?
I don't know what was happening there. She was like chewing it off so that then she could switch hands, but then I think either Ash or Scotty grabs it and stabs her with it. And then yeah, I don't know. Scotty then just decides he was listening to the tape and he's like, I gotta fucking dismember her. And I love that Scott's like, yeah, we have to bury her, and Ash was like, you can't bury her, and he's like, Ash, she's dead. What are you talking about? We have to bury her.
Yeah.
And then Scott it's funny too because he has the right idea after this too. He's like, we have to get the fuck out of here like now. He's like, you can stay with Linda and your sister. I think this is when he says it, but he's like, but they're gone. And the reveal of Linda first, like the way it's done is kind of a little hokey, doesn't hold up when you see like the
The
cut sort of
spider
like
webs coming off of
yeah, and then she
her
changes.
ankle. Yeah.
But then the way her demon acts, instead of just being like kind of very aggressive, just is like kind of creepy and laughing and all that,
Yeah.
is really cool. And then the changing back did throw me off a little bit, like which it threw the character off,
Yeah. I was gonna say it threw Ash off too.
but it threw me off too. I was like, oh wait, what's happening here? You know what I mean?
You're the character in the movie that's like, oh, thank God you turned back to normal with me absolutely having to do nothing. Let's get the hell out of here.
No, I still kill her. I still
Oh,
kill her.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What
The
about that? Those
relationship's not working out anyway. So
what about those practical effects, right? That like sometimes they're really good. Like at the end where they use like practical effects mixed with stop motion looked amazing for what it was. But the practical effects for like, just like the regular makeup for when they turn demons, it's just like you threw a bunch of like fucking plaster of Paris and like paper mache on their face.
well, and their eyes were apparently these very thick contact lenses that were
Yes.
so thick their eyes couldn't breathe, so they can only have them on for like 15 minutes at a time.
Oh,
So they
that
just had to
just
keep
sounds
applying and taking them off.
that sucks. That sounds like it sucks.
Well, it's the type of thing too that if you're like with like really good Hollywood makeup artists, you're like, okay, it's not as bad. But this was done in a fucking cabin in the middle of Tennessee. You're
Yeah.
just like, this isn't proper. Um, and you were talking about the special effects. When Scott hits Shelly, it's clearly like a fucking mannequin. Like he takes the shovel or whatever and hits her in the head and just like crumples. So I was like, that was clearly like not a person. Her
Yeah.
body
I mean
just like deflated.
that happens a bunch of times. They use mannequins if it's exactly like a mannequin in a bunch of things. I like the stuff where Ash was just slapping Linda back and forth, and you could tell like his hand was clearly farther away from the actress, and I was like, they had to time his hand movements with her like veering her head back and forth perfectly, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, it looked real too. And I wonder if he did hit her a little bit because like I said earlier, he like apologized in the years after. But no, yeah, that part is really good. It's also too. I guess what Scott has left, and then he comes back in. I love the line. He's like, "The trees, Ash. They know they're alive."
Oh yeah, that's another thing, right? Is like we don't know what happens to Scott when he leaves the thing. So does he? Is it the same thing that happens to Shelly? Because
He's like, "Scott, what happened to you? I don't want to talk about it, but we gotta get out of here."
no, because right after that he like dies on the couch and then he turns into a demon. So yeah, very well that could have happened to him.
Yeah, it could. He was bloody all over. He like got it a lot worse than Cheryl did the first time. That's like a common like the Evil Dead can't reveal itself too much in the beginning of the movie, but towards the end it's like let's fuck Scott up.
Yeah, of course, of course. So you were talking about how like bloody and disgusting this movie is, but then it goes to like fucking 11, right? When they start like so he drags. First of all, here's a pro filmmaker tip. Don't name two characters, Sherry and Cheryl, and expect me to always know what the fuck we're talking about, okay?
It was Shelley.
No, but he dragged Linda out of the.
Well, yeah, but that's not either of those.
So he drags Linda out, right? She's like possessed by the laughing deadite. And then he drags her out there, and I think he knocks her out. He ties her in the shed with like chains, and then he veers the chainsaw, and he can't do it. He chickens out.
Yeah, and that is apparently a real chainsaw. And that was really running. It's fucking dangerous. I do like the part. It's either right before this or right after. I can't remember. But Linda turns back normal, and then you hear Cheryl from in the basement, like, "Yeah, I'm good too. If you want to just let me out." And then she like fucking grabs through the wood. And like, is this when? No, no. So right after this, he takes Linda into the woods, is going to bury her alive, basically, and she just fucking destroys his ankle.
Oh, yeah, like when she pops her hand out of the dirt
Yeah.
and she just claws it to fucking oblivion, yeah. And then, dude, one of the coolest things is like camera tricks or whatever you want to call it is when he goes and stabs her with this like big like pole thing, and the way that they angle everything is like she lifts him up while holding on to the pole and then throws him. I thought that was really well done. For like practicality, that was done well.
Yeah, no, I agree. That whole scene, and then like the way it was funny because he chops her head off in midair, and then her body lands on him, and then starts to fucking grind on him a little bit.
Yeah, but also as she's trying to choke him, as her neck hole is just pouring out blood.
And that's when I was like, how has he not turned yet? Like all these
I
other
don't
people that have turned.
I don't think it's a blood infection thing though.
I think it's kind of like an I Am Legend thing. I don't know if you remember the practicality of that movie, but some people were affected by airborne, like a large percentage. Some people were affected by like getting bit or blood, and then some people were just like 100% immune.
My theory, and I don't read Demon, but there's probably something in the book that explains like, we need a human to do something, or we need to like torture this person for some reason or some sacrificial, ideology. So it's like they have no issue singling out one person, keeping them normal, and then fucking up the rest of the people within the vicinity to drive him crazy, or maybe he needs to do something with the book. I don't know. I mean, this is just like there's no rhyme or reason to this.
Yeah, I agree. Once again, I mean, we've talked so much about like the genesis of this movie. It's the first movie for a lot of these people, and like all the time when you have these sort of low budget movies that then turn into this whole thing, it's like the lore and the everything gets decided afterwards about how things work. So
I am 99% certain that between Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, all this that we're talking about is explained.
well, we'll get there in 2 years. We'll probably finish this up, and then maybe we'll do the TV show or something. We're not.
No,
gonna
we
do the
should
TV show.
no, we should do the remake. You'd like it actually.
Maybe next.
They're coming out. Sorry, I'm sorry. They're coming out with the sequel to the 2013 remake next year.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny that like what I was about to say is that our like spooky season next year is probably just gonna all be sequels of things we've already done,
100%, 100%.
and maybe we'll finally
We're
do
building
Friday
up.
the 13th.
We're like the MCU where we have a bunch of originals for like our first two phases, and then phase 3 is just the sequels to everything we've already built up.
And then we're gonna get to certain sequels and be like, yeah, we don't need to do the next one. This was shit. So, we get back to it after Linda's dead. He goes in. Cheryl's escaped. He shoots her, and then there's this big scene of him like closing the front door and then closing the back door. Like that's gonna save him.
Right.
But now Scott's missing, so he goes downstairs. He goes downstairs. They show his fucked up ankle, and then it's like a quarter of a second later he trips and like falls, and you're like, oh, you're showing the ankle because you were like, why did he fall? It's yeah, because his ankle's messed up.
Right.
And then the blood everywhere. Like
I didn't quite understand that. Did you understand that? Like where that pipe is coming from, or like what is holding that pipe together?
And it like gets in the light. No, I didn't understand it. What I did read is that like someone gave them advice when they were making this. They're just like, just make it as bloody as you can. Like just keep the blood flowing is what they said. And so that's what they did for this scene, just as like
Out of the power outlet sockets, out of
yeah.
everything.
Which, I mean, it's just like an all-encompassing demon, right? So yeah, it can make blood appear everywhere. I mean,
Sure it can.
The
Sure it
Shining
can.
had blood coming out of an elevator.
It turned on a vinyl record player. It turned on a cinema film camera, and then it blew them all up. So yeah, it can do anything the fuck it wants to do.
You know what that the music reminded me of, and obviously this came afterwards. But the only part of Jeepers Creepers I've seen is the very end, and it ends with like a very similar. Like it's such a horror movie trope now to end with that type of song choice, like playing as like something really fucking like gruesome is happening, or like something very scary has just happened, and like the movie ends, to have this kind of like old song playing on a record player.
So you kind of remind me of his reasoning of going down into the basement because
It
he
was the
whispers
shotgun
some.
shells.
Well, yes, but he whispers something, and I thought he said shelves, like. And I was like, then he goes down to the basement, it's like, shelves? What's on the shelves? And then he goes in and he grabs like the shells. And I was like, oh, shells. That's what he's talking about.
And then he has the flashback about dismembering. He's like, "Oh yeah, I got to dismember it." But it's like you already saw Scotty do that. Like you knew about that, bro.
Well, he did that with Linda.
Right. And we've talked all about the camera work, but the ending I think is like the best part of it, because it's not necessarily a POV, but it like the way the camera moves with Bruce Campbell is so disorienting. And
Yeah.
we've already talked about the way the cabin works and how it doesn't really maybe make sense, but it just makes the ending so disorienting. And then you have like these two people that could attack at any moment. Like it helps with making the ending so much better and scarier. And then you have like just this mirror that turns into water for some reason. That's out of nowhere.
Yeah, but it's cool. Like you can't even be mad at it. It's cool. Yeah, and you have like this lull. You were saying that lull is in the beginning. The lull is kind of here.
Oh yeah,
Because
absolutely.
Bruce Campbell is kind of has his back up against the door. There's a lot of time spent just a close up on his face with his eyes looking around, trying to like fucking figure out how to get out of this. He gets freaked out by the window and he shoots the window. So now he has to like take time and he has to like reload the shotgun, right? Um, and this is actually a legit jump scare that I actually jumped at a little bit. Was that her fucking hands breaking through the door and grabbing him? I
Right.
was like, oh my God. And then Scott attacks from the front. So now he's being attacked by the two people at the same time. And then yeah, he fights them off and oh man, how gruesome did you think when he shot through the door into her face and like half of her face was missing?
Well, that's not as bad as what I thought. The coolest part to me was when Scott picks him up and he fucking uses his thumbs to gouge Scott's eyes out.
Yeah, that's pretty good too.
Yeah. All of that leading to him realizing he needs to burn the book, and then the as you talked about, it's like basically like claymation looking like the demons destroying themselves and dying and just like decomposing all quickly.
I thought that was so cool. That was my favorite part of the movie. I thought that looked the best. Like with the demons coming out of their bodies and then like self-destructing. I thought that was so cool.
It's one of those things that, to me, it looks cool when you consider the budget in the year, right? Like if that came out
Well, yeah. I
today,
mean,
yeah. I'm just saying, like I'm not shitting on it. I'm just saying, like, yeah,
it
that
sounds like
is
you're shitting on it.
just qualifying. All right, just
Taking a
qualifying. Right.
big old dump on it.
The first time I saw this was September 22nd, 2022. All right, so I'm just saying, it's been 40 years. It looked a little different. Um, and, and one thing, though, kind of one of the last things I want to say is like, I don't know. Bruce Campbell's had like an interesting career, right? Like, I don't know that
Sure.
everyone's ever considered him like, a fucking amazing actor, right? He's definitely considered more of a comedic actor, but then he does these. and he's the type of guy that people love when they see in a movie, right?
Right.
But the last 20-25 minutes all depend on his ability as an actor, and that's why it works. Like, he's really great in this end, and it's just all the work is on him.
No, I agree. He has this charisma that even when he's not saying anything, you really are rooting for him to come out of this one way or the other. So when he's thrown on the ground and then he turns back up and he just like fucking um shoots them or stabs them or whatever, it's just like a yeah moment. And it's funny too because it's like I was introduced to Bruce Campbell in two different ways. One, I didn't even realize I was being introduced to Bruce Campbell was his cameos in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, right?
Right.
Him as the wrestler announcer, and then as the maitre d in Spider-Man 2, and then he's something else in Spider-Man 3. But then when I was really, really like introduced to like older Bruce Campbell acting was him in Burn Notice.
I knew you were going to mention Burn Notice.
Yeah. So he's just this really like kind of dynamic dude, but yeah, it just really works for this kind of role.
Right. And then I do love the way the movie fades out too. Like, it's got this wholesome music as like the join us is fading out, and then she's got this kind of normal music that's like hopeful, and then you have the demon kind of going through and then attacking Bruce at the very end, and then it ends with that like, old song on a record player feel to it. So all of that is just like it's a very well done ending that I've now seen copied thousands of times in like horror movies and TV shows and whatnot.
Did you were you there when I dressed up for Halloween as Ash?
No, I don't think I had the privilege of seeing that. You know what? You should just send me a copy of it, and I'll sneak it in the end of like the Instagram reel, like
I don't even
photos.
know, but it was Ash. I dressed up as Ash from Army of Darkness mixed with Ash Ketchum from Pokemon. It was pretty awesome.
Of course you did. Of course you did. Yeah, we don't need to put that in. Um, I missed that. Unfortunately, that's a shame.
No, I mean overall, you're right. It's 40 years and there's a lot of corny, hokey stuff but I think as like the baseline for a bunch of these films, and especially introducing the world to Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi, you have to give a lot of credit to Evil Dead. And I think, yeah, it's not one of my favorite films, but it does hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, and for me, this is like the baseline to be able to watch Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. So that in and of itself. But I actually really liked it. Um, it's, I talked about this when we did Super Dark Times, our last movie, because it's just like we're at a point now where you're not really going to have these indie movies anymore. Like, you're going to have these like indie streaming movies, right? Like, all movies now are going to be cheaper. So when you find these movies that just like came out of nowhere with no budget, and sort of like people taking a chance, or at least it felt like that, right? And just it's like,
Right.
you know, this movie is kind of like, some people consider this like the greatest horror movie ever made, and I think it is like, it's not like the Citizen Kane of horror movies is like I'm not saying it's like the invention of it, but it's just like this coming out at the same time as like The Thing. It's just like it's taking horror movies in like such a, not a new direction, but it's just like
No,
people
it's a
see,
different direction.
but people just see this and are like, holy shit. And then, as you just said, so many like Cabin in the Woods horror movies coming after this, right? And just like this did so much like for the genre. And once again, $350,000, and it's the first movie that this guy made, and that this guy acted in, and just that's like, that in and of itself is amazing.
Even movies like They Come at Night, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like this and that new M Night Shyamalan movie, Knock at the Cabin Door, right?
I
It's
just saw the trailer for that. It looks, I mean, hit or miss for him recently, but I'm gonna watch it.
yeah, same.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched.
I'm Milan.
And this is David, and I finally watched The Evil Dead.